Hello uh, and namaste, everyone. First of all, I wish to express my gratitude to Sakar for giving me an opportunity to be part of the magnificent Savitri series of talks. Today, I'm going to deliver on Savitri and Satyavan, a dual power of God. And I feel we'll profit much if we analyze this in the light of Sri Aurobindo's epic and his philosophy of transformation and evolution. To explore and know about the nature of the relationship between Savitri and Satyavan and how they are two powers of the world movement and cosmic movement, we may begin with what Sri Aurobindo himself says in the note preluding his epic poem. And then we may try to comprehend the meaning of the Godhead, the Absolute, the Parabrahman, to see how Savitri and Satyavan, how this pair functions as its dual power or is its dual power. Sri Aurobindo reads into the Mahabharata Upakhyan of conjugal love the symbolism of the Vedic myths and writes, Satyavan is the soul carrying the divine truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance. Savitri is the divine word, daughter of the sun, goddess of the supreme truth, who comes down and is born to save. This explanation by Sri Aurobindo itself announces the unique balance of relationship of Savitri and Satyavan on which is sustained the power which works through and for the highest power, the highest truth, and is fed with multiple meanings and interpretations at the mythological, philosophical, and spiritual levels. As we delve deeper into the legend, we realize that on no account is the Savitri Satyavan relationship an ordinary one, either in Sri Aurobindo's poem or the original Mahabharata story. The power that works itself out through the equation of the Savitri Satyavan relationship points at larger issues of life and death and works to aid the evolutionary effort of Earth in a purposefully creative way. It is part of the cosmic process of involution evolution, a separation, a reunion, and that is the central focus of this relationship. And Savitri and Satyavan are names, they are symbolic figures behind which are concealed the cosmic acts of the Creator and the manifested creation. So let us briefly explain the term Creator or God. In fact, uh, it's wrong to say that we are going to define it because we cannot do so, nor even can we explain it in mental terms. So we'll try to comprehend and understand a little of what we mean by the unknown and absolute quantity we call God. It is, we can say, one reality, the ultimate omnipresent reality, one single truth, one indivisible entity having two aspects of the being and the becoming. The silence and the dynamism, the passivity and activity are part or poises of the same comprehensive consciousness which sustains the universe. It is vast and boundless and self existent. It is, if we can say, in a nutshell, if we just want to know the qualities or attributes of this, we can just about say something about its, just to define it in a way, we can say it is the indivisible existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. And that covers probably a very minor part of what we are trying to define. So, and we are an aspect and part of the world movement, which is in itself part of that reality which is beyond space and time. But for its play in the terrestrial field, it bisects into mainly two powers, and organizes itself in myriad ways for its own lila. The pure existence is a fact of being, and world existence a fact of becoming. These are two fundamental facts of consciousness, a double fact, a dual power as we experience in human life on earth. As Sri Aurobindo says, there is one Lord and Self, and the two are his representatives. And to these two representatives, from time to time, in different philosophical systems, in different races and cultures, in different milieus, we have been giving different names. So sometimes we give this power the name of, say, Purusa-Prakriti, its soul nature, Shiv Shivani, its Ram Sita, its Chidatma Chit Shakti, or Savitri Satyavan. For enacting the divine Leela, they have to work in conjunction. In Sri Aurobindo's poem, Savitri says, "For I, the woman, am the force of God, he, the eternal's delegate soul in man." The Supreme Absolute presents itself in two aspects, and each is necessary to the other. In fact, they explain each other. There is a seeming duality of the Prakriti and Purush for world activity and world existence, but fundamentally it is a biune power in their intimate oneness. Sri Aurobindo explains this in the Life Divine, and he says, in the person aspect, a dual person emerges, Ishwar Shakti, the mystery of the masculine and feminine cosmic principles whose play and interaction are necessary for all creation. In the superconscient truth of the self existence, these two are fused and implied in each other, one and indistinguishable. But in the spiritual pragmatic truth of the dynamism of the universe, they emerge and become active as a dual principle. So let us further analyze what Savitri and Satyavan, who become the dual power in an epoch of time, symbolize in their relationship. Now, there are many stories about the creator and the manifested creation. The Puranic tales record the story of Brahma and the separation of his powers, due to which his luster diminishes. It is an obvious metaphor for fragmentation of consciousness, which the mother also talks about. Because of this successive fragmentation, the original power, light, and bliss, these are lost at the lowest, most mundane level of material existence. So the task is of reunion, the union again of the Lord and his Shakti. The meeting and union of Savitri and Satyavan symbolize at one level this divine task. It is the wedding of the eternal Lord and his consort. As Sri Aurobindo writes in Savitri, the wedding of the eternal Lord and spouse took place again on earth in human form. So it is not one episode, it's not a final union event occurring only once, but it is a process, an eternal one, an eternal yake going on through time. It is a continual meeting, a continual separation, and that is how the divine play of the Creator goes on. It is the divine play of the Creator. Sri Aurobindo has said that the Purush and Prakriti aspects always go together. And he says, whatever status, nature, or consciousness force in action assumes, manifests, or develops, there is a corresponding status of the spirit. So it is a dual power, and we have to seek to know and admit both Shiv and Kali, as Sri Aurobindo says, to understand the measureless movement in time and space with regard to that timeless and spaceless pure existence. So the point is, if we know uh, either the pure existence, we know only half the story. So we have to know them together, that is, as a dual power, and we have to admit the reality of both. To explore deeply the meaning and symbolic significance of the role of Savitri and Satyavan as a dual power of God, we must find the significance of the apocalyptic moment of their meeting on terrestrial planes, of which Sri Aurobindo has given an account in sublime and joyful notes of poetry which delight our senses and soul. And mystics over the world through time have talked, have experienced, and written about this kind of union, the divine union or the mystic union. For instance, in one of his romantic numbers, Tagore, the great poet, he talks of the epiphanic moment of the meeting of the lovers, calling it the Mahalagna. And he says, দেখা হয়েছিল তোমাতে আমাতে কি জানি কি মহালগনে. Translated, it means God knows at which auspicious moment, supreme auspicious moment it was that we two had met. That Mahalagna, that significantly great moment, is not only of the meeting, not only of loving at first sight, but it is the eternalized moment of a recognition of the relationship that was and the separation that is. And it is a reconfirmation of the divine relationship of the lover and beloved, of the two who are always one. They are the dual power, and Sri Aurobindo writes about them in Savitri. He says, all is their play. The two who are one are the secret of all power. The two who are one are the might and right in things. And their moment of meeting, their moment of recognition, is a gestating moment which would eventually create in time a new space and a new species who shall be fundamentally different from man as he is today. It is the conjoined power of Savitri and Satyavan which shall accomplish this evolutionary task. And again, Sri Aurobindo says, they are two fires that burn toward the parent sun, two rays that travel to the original light. Savitri, we may say, is the active aspect of the Supreme Brahman born to raise and uplift man to higher consciousness. And Satyavan, the passive aspect of the same, who wants and is waiting and aspiring to rise to the higher consciousness. Satyavan, at another level of interpretation, is the mental being evolved almost to perfection, but cannot go beyond that. He too is aware of the goal, final goal of life, but to reach that, he needs the power, force, and grace of Savitri. Both Savitri and Satyavan are thus delegates of God, the evolving soul, and the world mother. And this has been their relationship from ancient times, their relationship of yore. It's an eternal coexistence. As Savitri herself says, for we were man and woman from the first, the twin souls born from one undying fire. This dual power has been working and acting together through eternity under different names and personas and in different eras of terrestrial time. As the Gita also declares, know Purush and Prakriti to be both eternal without beginning. To consider then the role and persona of Savitri and Satyavan, let us go back a little and take a look at the circumstances and significance first of the birth of Savitri. What is her mission here on earth? In Sri Aurobindo's words, it's to make dumb matter conscious of its God, she keeps her will that hopes to divinize clay. Always she drives the soul to new attempt, plants heaven's delight in the heart's passionate mire. But all this she cannot achieve alone. She has to wait for the other half of herself, for her twin power, to accomplish this mission. It is through him and with him that she will weave anew the old tale of death. And this is no ordinary task to be performed by any ordinary being. The Supreme has to incarnate for this. In this context, therefore, the birth and character of Savitri assume great significance. And Sri Aurobindo writes, once more that will put on an earthly shape, outlined by the pressure of this new descent, a lovelier body formed than earth had known. Evidently, it is the supreme creatrix who is going to take birth. It is the goddess who is going to descend. So, the moment of Savitri's birth is as significant as its purpose. She was born in springtime when all nature was at beauty's festival. And Sri Aurobindo describes it in these words: in this high signal moment of the gods, answering earth's yearning and her cry for bliss, a greatness from our other countries came. So we see all nature rebels and is eager for the birth of the Savior. It is a significant moment in the earth consciousness, like the birth of a Krishna or a Christ, who are born in earth's auspicious moments, or rather make those moments auspicious. So, after incarnating in a human body, Savitri, Sri Aurobindo says, lived guarded in her spirit's luminous cell, alone mid men in her diviner kind. Her nature dwelt in a strong separate air. Harmoniously she impressed the earth with heaven. Sri Aurobindo thus makes us aware of the aura of divinity that Savitri carries around her, her common days spent in earth's intimacies, her spirit yet keeping the stature of the gods. The power within her shaped her molding sense in deeper figures than our surface types. Her springing childlike thoughts were richly turned into luminous patterns of her soul's deep truth. With a greater nature, she was one. So, we are aware of the presence of someone who is more than a mere mortal. Sri Aurobindo further describes the phenomenon that Savitri was in these words: the body that held this greatness seemed almost an image made of heaven's transparent light. If such is the radiance, the power, the splendor, what man can stand up to it? What mortal can equal or match it? Actually, there is none to match it. And Sri Aurobindo says, none could stand up her equal and her mate. Savitri was the glory unapproachably divine and lived alone amidst her own greatness and glory, as no equal heart came close to join her heart. No transient earthly love assailed her calm. No hero passion had the strength to seize. No eyes demanded her replying eyes. Yet, the mission for which she has taken this birth has to be accomplished, and also it cannot be accomplished alone. Savitri has to find her soulmate, her divine partner, who will enact with her the cosmic play for us, who will join her in her supreme task of restoring immortality to man and rescuing him from death bound laws. As the father Ashupati tells her, perhaps the heavens guard thee for some great soul. Thy fate, thy work are kept somewhere afar. Thy spirit came not down, a star alone. Now, look at this sentence, one of the key sentences on which rests the meaning of this dual power, because he has realized that along with Savitri, another power of equal measure has descended, because whatever she has been missioned to do, she cannot do alone, all alone. So she came down along with another star of her measure. And yes, every time there is an incarnation, every time an avatar takes birth, it is a dual power that descends. And where twin souls are brought into the same orbit of time and space. It has been so from ancient times, and it's up to the modern times we see the same phenomenon. Thus, Savitri waits for the right time, the ripe hour, and the perfect being. And all this while, her hours were a ritual in a timeless vein. Her acts became gestures of sacrifice. When she had dwelt long, apart in herself, came the call to the quest. Ashwapati, after his visitations from occult realms, comes to perceive the significance of Savitri's birth and tells her, "Depart where love and destiny call your charm. Venture through the deep world to find thy mate." Savitri goes in search of her mate, and her quest ends in the Shalva woods, the residence of Satyavan. And then, love in the wilderness met Savitri. What a very powerful line in a sentence, with the utter simplicity of the bare style and with the rich potential of the spiritual scriptural. Sri Aurobindo announces the birth of divine love on mortal planes. In this symbolically significant moment, Sri Aurobindo says about Savitri, "Here first she met on the uncertain earth the one for whom her heart had come so far." Now, this is a journey not to be measured in earthly miles or hours. It is not that Savitri has just traveled from her father's kingdom to the Shalva woods, but it is a travel in cosmic time, and the distance is to be measured between heaven and earth. So, love enters Savitri's soul. Yet, this is not the first or even the last meeting of the lovers. This drama is enacted and unfolds continually, has an eternal occurrence. Savitri and Satyavan's meeting on the terrestrial plane is a recurrence, one out of the many that have taken place, and binds them again and anew in a powerful relationship. Sri Aurobindo says, "All was a part of old forgotten selves. She seemed to her remembering witness soul to trace again a journey often made." So, what does this meeting entail in the cosmic scheme? Let us ponder here a bit on the persona of Satyavan now. The Mahabharata legend describes Satyavan as intelligent, bright, shining like the sun, munificent, bounteous, beautiful, soft natured, radiant, steadfast, counselor of truth, and established in Brahmanhood. Sri Aurobindo, in his own narration, takes this cue from Vyas and builds the character of Satyavan along much the same lines. Satyavan's dwelling in the forest had already made of him a foster child of beauty and solitude, and he grew in divine communion with nature, a rare privilege. Sri Aurobindo describes Satyavan in these glowing terms, and he says, "Erect and lofty like a spear of God, his figure led the splendor of the morn. Freedom's imperious beauty curved his limbs. The joy of life was on his open face. His look was a wide daybreak of the gods. His head was a youthful rishi's touched with light. His body was a lover's and a king's. So all virtues, all good qualities of the body and spirit seem to have condensed in the form of Satyavan. Or else, how could he have attracted one like Savitri? For when Savitri saw him, it was as if the god touched in time her conscious soul. Her vision settled, caught, and all was changed. It was then that Savitri awakens to the mighty presence in herself. When she meets Satyavan, she recollects all her past and recognizes both her own self and Satyavan's and discovers anew the meaning and purpose of their birth, their meeting, and their union. And Sri Aurobindo says, her fathomless soul looked out at him from her eyes. This word alone she uttered and said all. O Satyavan, I have heard thee and I know. I know that thou and only thou art he. In this is the recognition of a kindred soul, a oneness of being. And Satyavan too recognizes and discovers in the apocalyptic moment of love the meaning and purpose of his entire life. And he confesses, for now I know that all I lived and was moved towards this moment of my heart's rebirth. I look back on the meaning of myself, a soul made ready on earth's soil for thee. It is the recognition of a relation made far back in time. Savitri perceives the eternal in the heart of time, the infinite in the bosom of the finite. And Sri Aurobindo says, as the mortal wakes into eternity, as the finite opens to the infinite, thus were they in each other lost a while. This rediscovery of each other plays out its significance at the individual level of the myth and also at the metaphysical and symbolical levels. It is an intense unity of soul with soul, mind with mind, life with life. The necessity of this relationship can be comprehended when interpreted at the highest spiritual and symbolical levels. In Sri Aurobindo's scheme, merging into the divine and finding bliss in union is not the final aim. Savitri and Satyavan, keeping their own identities, must yet unitedly and with their powers in unison complete a divine task. Their union must lead to a new creation, signaling the beginning of a new age. In the Savitri Satyavan relationship, Sri Aurobindo reads the philosophy of the future evolution of earth and man, and he writes in Savitri, in a new act of the drama of the world, the united two began a greater age. But this is and can be only when Savitri and Satyavan have cleared their path of progress from all obstacles. For after their meeting and the wedding of souls, they are beset with a dire difficulty, a supreme obstacle which they must confront and conquer before they advance further in their path to victory. This is the barrier of death, the great obstacle to man's transformation. Thus, in his reworking of the Savitri legend, Sri Aurobindo projects Satyavan as a symbol of the soul of mankind, which, though in the grip of death, yet cannot die. It has to be retrieved from death. And so, time and again, the dual power has to effectuate in the life of the earth. And time and again, Savitri and Satyavan have to take birth and defeat the law of death. Savitri has to establish the dharma, the law of truth, against the face of death and retrieve the immortal soul of Satyavan in this mortal world. Therefore, Savitri's repeated arguments and challenges with the god of death to return Satyavan to the world of the living, because she says they are charged with a high mission, and this mission, she declares, to lead man's soul towards truth and God we are born, to draw the checkered scheme of mortal life into some semblance of the immortal's plan, to shape it closer to an image of God, a little nearer to the idea divine. So, if this is the work, if this is their mission, it is evident that the work is yet incomplete. And we can say in the poet's word, it is the petty done, the undone vast. So the work on earth is yet unfinished. For eons the attempt is on. But alone Savitri cannot fulfill this mission. She needs a twin power, together with whom she shall work out the divine future of the earth. And she asks and reminds herself, are there not still a million fights to wage? Are there not still unnumbered chants to weave? So, as long as there are fights to wage and chants to weave, so long the dual power has to work on the terrestrial planes. And it is with the sword of truth, the sword of love, of which the hilt and the blade are Savitri and Satyavan, that death shall be defeated. That is how their dual power shall be successful in conquering mortality. Sri Aurobindo metaphorically defines this power in these poetic words. Thy fine curved jeweled hilt, called Savitri, thy blade's exultant smile, named Satyavan. So their work, however, does not revolve around individual victory or defeat. As Savitri tells the god of death, O death, not for my heart's sweet poignancy, nor for my happy body's bliss alone, I have claimed from thee the living Satyavan, but for his work and mine, our sacred charge. And what is the sacred charge? The sacred charge is the most difficult task of divinizing earth, of transforming man. The Sri Aurobindo raises the level of the legend to cosmic scales, and so Savitri and Satyavan become symbolically representative figures enacting an ancient drama anew for us. It is imperative in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy of integralism that a total and radical and complete transformation take place. And this is what the powers who have incarnated as Savitri and Satyavan have come to achieve. Savitri spells out the mission of this dual power in these words: my soul and his indissolubly linked in the one task for which our lives were born, to raise the world to God in deathless light, to bring God down to the world on earth we came, to change the earthly life to life divine. In fact, this was the philosophy and spiritual mission of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother actually. Savitri stands for the Spirit's power and truth, and the salvation of the world and man is worked out through the divine relationship of the immortal and the mortal, who work here as a dual power of God. It is a relationship of necessity, eternal, occurring in every cycle of evolution. In fact, every time a yogi has found his immortality, it has been due to and through the confluence of two powers which work always in conjunction: the aspiration and willpower conjoined with the dissenting grace. So, if Satyavans is the aspiring soul, then it is through the divine Shakti, the divine mother, that he shall realize the higher status of his being. And we see how Satyavan surrenders his all, his life, his death, his body, all to this divine power, and he is willingly led by that force. And Sri Aurobindo says that our ascension to higher planes, to supreme nature, can only be done by the supreme Shakti taking up our mentality and transforming it into her supra mentality. Thus, Savitri and Satyavan are archetypal figures that return at every cosmic crisis and resurrect as powers that must perform the evolutionary task of liberating and saving the earth and salvaging the wretched condition of man. On another symbolic level, it is the awakening of the inconscient and an act in which the superconscient and inconscient fill with the supreme Sachidanand, one in two and two in one. It is a merging into the one on a spiritual level, and yet retaining the sense of the two, the sense of the dual in that one at the most material level, which keeps the material world from collapsing into a blissful lair or extinction. For it is here on the material plane that the battle has to be fought and won, and the dual power of Savitri and Satyavan must usher in the new age, the everlasting day. As Savitri recounts and says to Satyavan, our bodies need each other in the same last. All that I was before, I am to thee still. Close comrade of thy thoughts and hopes and toils, I am thy kingdom, even as thou art mine. The sovereign and the slave of thy desire, thou art my world. Now, these are not just the words of a lover to his beloved, these are words explaining and defining a mystical union. And what a deep and profound spiritual philosophy is embedded in these words. So it's informs us of an eternal meeting, an eternal union. So we see how the sense of I and thou is retained, and that reinforces the concept of the dual power of a single entity. In the course of her debate with death, Savitri defines and explains the necessity and nature of this power when she says to the god of death, give back the other self my nature asks. Thy spaces need him not to help their joy. Earth needs his beautiful spirit made by thee. It is evident that it is a dual power that is going to act upon terrestrial planes, which at the highest level is one and indivisible. Because at the transcendental level, the dual terms, these phenomenal entities, they are transcended. So to carry on the evolutionary task, this power is needed here on earth. And this is to be regarded as a manifestation of the reality and not to be taken as any kind of illusion. It is a much needed power for the terrestrial planes because evolution is still going on. It has not reached the last stage. And this power helps perhaps in the realization of all the possibilities of the Supreme Absolute in its mutable becoming. So we can say that it is the manifestation of the glory of the divinity. So, as Savitri tells the god of death that if she returns to earth without Satyavan, earth will suffer. But Savitri has chosen to share earth's struggle and fate. And so finally, death grants her the boon and gives back to her the living Satyavan with these prophetic words of hope for the future and the fulfillment of their mission. And the god of death says, descend to life with him thy heart desires. I sent you forth of old beneath the stars. a dual power of God in an ignorant world, in a hedged creation shut from limitless self, bringing down God to the insentient globe, lifting earth beings to immortality. And this dual power shall deliver the firstborn of the new supernal race and transform the terrestrial conditions so that earth may be touched by the Supreme. So we see the Godhead assumes the two forms of the conscious soul, Purush, and nature soul, Prakriti, in order to enjoy its own bliss, in order to sport in its own delight, and also to lead man to his high destiny. Sri Aurobindo in the Life Divine wrote, to lose forth and enjoy this infinite movement and variation of its self delight is the object of its extensive or creative play of force. So, the delight of being seeks to realize itself as the delight of becoming, and it is then that the dual power is needed. Thus, Satyavan, soul of the world, and Savitri, the incarnate word, are two-souled, two-bodied for the joys of time. It is as much for the sheer bliss of self-creation, of self-representation, as for the evolutionary purpose that the dual power of the Supreme Absolute works here on earth. And it is the communion of Shiv and Shakti everywhere. It is the communion of the male and female every time. So, this is the relationship of Savitri and Satyavan and the symbolic meaning of the dual power. It is a relationship divine, eternal, impelled by cosmic necessities, and finding its last fulfillment in the transformed and divinized earth when the incarnate dual power shall open God's door, eternal supermind, touch earthly time. Thank you.